Hello, and welcome to Tavern Talk. I'm Trevor Lancaster.
And I'm Timothy Gibbons.
Today's segment is A Pint for the Players, where we're going to be throwing down tips and tricks for players new and old.
And once more, we are in the Drunken Orc at Sea Point, where we'll be for a little bit.
I mean, Valhalla hasn't thrown us out yet, and that's a good sign.
Very good. So, this tip for players is coordinating your actions between rounds of combat. Spoiler alert, this is about what you do between your rounds of combat.
Yeah, that point when you've done what you've done and, well, you're just waiting for your turn again. There's a lot of things you can do in between those points. Thinking of your strategies beforehand to try and aid the players or aid the situation in best you can. Now, it's not always easy to put something together where you can have everybody act at once or act in unison to destroy a thing. And it's extremely hard when you spend your time on the phone the whole time and you're not paying attention to the fight.
Right, because as a player, you want to hear your other fellow players saying, "Hey, I have a strategy," not, "Hey, I have a meme."
Unless that meme involves a really good strategy.
Then it's forgivable.
Yes. Which is very seldom, but sometimes that hilarious meme gets turned into a strategy. Not often enough to allow you to look at memes while you're fighting a creature.
Especially if it's a lich.
Now, there's a lot of actions that you can plan to take on your turn, including holding actions.
Well, this basically where you're wanting to coordinate with another player. Maybe you hold back with a magical cantrip or a magical spell, so another player can either move out of the way and you get a clear shot, or they move something into the line of fire that will cause even further damage.
Or something's charging at you and your archer players and you can't quite get to them in one round of movement. Instead of rushing out into the middle of the field and letting them get the first strike on you, you can use your action to help your ranged characters make that a hit so much easier by using the help action. A help action gives a player advantage on any of the things that they are attempting to do.
And quite honestly, it's an underused action.
It's very underused.
Especially for the advantage it can give you in combat.
Literally, advantage in combat. This is primarily for D&D 5th edition.
Which is all I know.
Which is all you know. Which, it's funny that I have to keep saying that, as that's basically all we're talking about, but I have to quantify, because I was DMing 3.5 before 5. It's always the 5s that make it better.
It is. Good things come in 5s.
Good things come in 5s, except beholders.
Or Tiamat.
You never want Tiamat to come in 5.
No. Well, she already comes in 5. She's got 5 heads.
Does she have 5 heads?
She does indeed have 5 heads.
Oh, yeah.
One for each of the chromatic dragons.
I've never sat down long enough to try and count. I always just ran.
Well, I mean, when the Dungeon Master rolls those dice behind his screen, gives that concerned look, that heavy sigh, and looks up before he even has to say it, you're like, my character turns and runs. I'm using the dash action. I'm a rogue, so I'm using the dash action twice.
I'm using the dash action, and I'm using my action to take the dash action.
Yes.
But don't worry, because I'm also 1 level or 2 levels in fighter, and I'm going to action surge and use the dash action.
And leave the party far behind. By the time Tiamat's done snacking on them, you're over in the next world.
Now, in between your turns, when the dice haven't quite hit the table and when your turn hasn't been called yet, paying attention to what everybody else is doing on the field, or taking that little bit of time to whisper to somebody else who's not on your turn, just whispering, not really causing too much of a stir, to kind of plan out what they're going to do as an action, to help you do what you're going to do as an action, is something that is really well worth your time, moves the pace of combat forward, and it gives you guys this ability to, rain fire down from above.
Or maybe you're a spellcaster coordinating with the fighter, and you're saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to try to put hold person on him. If I do, action surge, go to town on him.
Yep.
Because at that point, if the character has made a unsuccessful save against your hold person spell, that fighter now has advantage on his attacks.
Yeah.
That advantage, with an action surge, you can throw down some serious hurt.
A lot of hurt.
Coordinating your actions, trying to find ways that you can do something that's not only going to put down hurt on the enemies, but is going to put your fellow players and your fellow teammates in an advantageous position where they can do massive hurt to the enemies as well. Coordination, you can't stress it enough. It's very important, especially in later levels. If you're a cohesive group and you can fight as one unit, I don't care if you're all level 5s. If you work together, you're a level 15 in the DM's eyes. You can take down just about anything. Including purple worms. So, coordinating actions. And I think one thing we need to talk about, too, is heading into combat. Always a good idea to coordinate, okay, how are we going to go into a situation? Depending on where you're going. Okay, maybe you want your heavies up front and you want your range behind. Cleric getting ready to throw down bless and healing spells as fast as they can.
Yes.
Maybe you want to have a heavy or two in the back because you're smelling yourself an ambush. Definitely always consider the tactical situation of the party. The heavies and the tanks, you want them where they're going to do the most good. You want your ranged guys behind the tanks so that, they usually don't have as much HP, but they can throw down some heavy ranged attacks. Spellcasters, generally they have the lowest HP, but the spells they can throw down can do a lot of damage, but they won't survive in combat. So always keep that in consideration. You don't want your tanks off rummaging around somewhere when all of a sudden, boom, you get ambushed, your magic caster's down, your cleric's bleeding out on the dungeon floor, your ranged guy is having to dash back so that he doesn't have disadvantage on his ranged attacks, and meanwhile you're over there looting the body of a hobgoblin captain.
Hey guys, I found a really cool stick! Guys!
Exactly.
So setting up so that you're not doing something destructive to the party in the middle of combat is really important. If you see a treasure chest, it'll probably be there when everybody else is dead. If you see an interesting item on the body, it'll probably be there when everybody else is dead.
Right. Looting the bodies is fine. Looting the bodies while they're warm is fine. Just make sure that there's no living enemies at the same time.
Just make sure that you're safe enough that if you felt so, you could take a short rest. Now, another thing to consider is making sure you're well stocked up on items before you go out on any adventures.
Mm-hmm.
I understand a lot of you are against the shopping sprees that go on throughout the main towns and whatnot. But honestly, having a nice day of just shopping, picking items up, going through and making sure your bag is filled with extra bits of oil to later thwart the DM in whatever he has planned, unless it's a bunch of fire slugs.
Yes, or stocking up on all these pre-industrial or industrial components that you can then turn into dirty nitro bombs.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That was great.
That was terrifying.
Hey,
I did not realize a single bomb could do that much damage.
With enough time, love, and tender nitroglycerin, anything is possible.
So yes, and I know this is for players, but a caution to DMs: if your player starts asking for seemingly innocuous metallurgical items, check their background, understand what they know. This will save you many a heartache in the long run.
And for all those players out there, chemistry is truly a beautiful thing. It can turn anything that is innate into something lethal.
Such as not just dirty nitro, but acetylene torches. Oh Lord, what did you come up with? You had the dirty nitro and the acetylene torches were the ones that boggled my mind, but you came up with a host of explosives.
I don't remember. There was a lot of things that, I was sitting there, I was like, oh, they have this technology? Wait a second. We have this? So many things you can do with acid, guys. So very many things. Especially purified.
So many terrifying things you can do with acid. And, again...
Never do acid.
Yes, well... Or Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Yeah, don't do that either.
But again, going back to what we were talking about, adventuring is fine. Adventuring is the primary reason why we're doing, Dungeons and Dragons, is you want to be out there, killing the creatures, getting the treasure, but taking that time to do that shopping, to fill up your bag with health potions, fill it up with maybe some alchemist fire, to get those things that will give you that little bit of edge in combat, that is just as important as going out and collecting bounties and slaughtering the monster. Because if you keep going out there without restocking your health potions, maybe you come across a situation where the dungeon master is rolling hot, and you are not. I have never personally experienced this as a dungeon master, but I've heard it can happen. Where suddenly you realize that you are on your last legs. The monster has taken a beating, but you're closer to death than he is. And you have no health potions because you haven't stocked up in the last 3 towns. Going on that shopping trip, always important. This doesn't mean you have to take 9 hours shopping, but it does mean you want to pick up some essentials.
It's very true. And I understand for a lot of players, sometimes the shopping trip is near unbearable to sit there and wait. But there's a lot of things you can actually do while you're sitting there and waiting. And I know it sounds a little bit boring to look up more things about your character archetype or your class features. But looking those things over real quick while your friends are actually out through the town and plotting into your character can be a great way to pass the time while they're out buying 15,000 mirrors to try and get daylight down into a vampire's tomb.
With the way the sun shifts over the course of the time, that is a nightmare without Mage Hand.
It is a nightmare without Unseen Servant. I tell you, Unseen Servant works way better. And then being clever with the things that you throw out there.
Mm-hmm.
Some DMs will allow it. Some will make you make extreme rolls to make it happen. But that's kind of the thing. The DM has the final say on anything you're going to be doing in your campaign. If your DM seems to allow you to set up 15,000 mirrors and direct a sunbeam down into a tomb, well, then set up those mirrors. Oh,
just make sure somebody knows how to cast Unseen Servant. And Time Stop might not be a bad one if you have that spell slot available.
Well, that's like 9th level.
It is 9th level, but I mean, you could be going after a vampire lich.
At 9th level, you can cast Sunbeam. The instance I'm talking about, I think we were 4th.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Then never mind.
Yeah.
Unseen Servant.
Yeah. No, it worked out really good, actually. Our mirrors got destroyed the second round of combat, but we ended up doing a very respectable 60 points of damage.
Not bad against a vampire.
Yes. We died. But that's beside the point.
Sometimes it's the brilliance that inspires you the most.
Sometimes it is the brilliance.
And sometimes you just have to walk away from the table with a moral victory.
Sometimes it's not so much about the victory as it was the journey getting to that spot. Getting to your ultimate demise. Anyways, this has been a pint for the players.
I'm Timothy Gibbons, and if you want to communicate with us, please cast your sending spells to gmtaverntalk@gmail.com, or you can cast message into the reply section below. I'm Timothy Gibbons.
And I'm Trevor Lancaster. Cheers.